Yesterday evening, I was buried in a mountain of old paperwork, bills, receipts, and forms I should have sorted out years ago. The silence in my home was broken by the abrupt buzzing of my phone. At first, I ignored it, assuming it was just another scam call. But then, something made me glance at the screen. And when I saw the name flashing across it, my heart stopped. Lisa. 15 years. That's how long it had been since she walked out of my life, leaving a gaping wound in her wake. Back then, we had what I thought was a solid, steady life. A cozy little home, 2 wonderful kids, Frank and Amanda, and the kind of simple happiness that comes from routine and love. I believed we were building something unbreakable. I was wrong. Everything shattered the moment I found out about her affair. And it wasn't just infidelity, it was betrayal of the cruelest kind. Lisa wasn't sneaking around with a stranger. No, she was with Victor, the guy who lived right across the street. Someone I had invited into my home, someone I had trusted enough to call a friend. Barbecues, birthdays, neighborhood gatherings, he was always there. And behind my back, so was she. The night it all came crashing down is seared into my memory. It was a Sunday. I had just tucked the kids into bed and was cleaning up the kitchen when Lisa walked in. Her face was pale, but her expression was firm, like someone who had already decided how the conversation was going to go. "We need to talk," she said. The words that followed ripped my world apart. She told me everything, the secret meetups, the stolen moments, the endless lies. But the worst part wasn't her confession. It was what she said afterward. "Victor understands me in a way you never could." I remember just sitting there, numb, as the woman I had built a life with justified ripping it apart. I didn't say anything at first, ripping it apart. And, too hollowed out by the weight of her words. The days that followed were a blur of arguments, sleepless nights, and an overwhelming sense of loss. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, she left. Not just me. She left Frank and Amanda, too. She moved in with Victor without so much as looking back, abandoning not just her marriage but her role as a mother. No explanations, no attempts to fight for custody, just gone. 15 years later, I'd thought I had buried all of that pain. Thought I had moved past it. But then, last night, her name appeared on my phone, dragging everything back to the surface like a wound ripped open. I stared at the screen, my mind racing with 1,000 questions. Why was she calling? What could she possibly want after all these years? Against my better judgment, I answered. "Hello," I said, my voice colder than I'd intended. A pause. Then, a voice I hadn't heard in over a decade. "Alexander," she said softly. "It's me." Hearing my name come out of her mouth after all this time felt like a gut punch. My grip tightened on the phone, but I said nothing, waiting for her to continue. "I know this is unexpected," she said, her tone cautious, hesitant. "But I need to see you. There's something I have to tell you." I should have hung up. I should have told her I wanted nothing to do with her. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. And despite everything, despite all the pain she had caused, I wanted to know what she had to say. So, against every rational instinct, I agreed to meet her. And as I ended the call, a deep sense of dread settled over me. Whatever she was about to tell me, I had the sinking feeling it was going to turn my world upside down all over again. The next morning, I couldn't focus on anything. My mind kept circling back to that phone call, replaying every word, every pause, every hesitant breath Lisa took. She sounded nervous, almost fragile. But there was something else beneath her voice, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Was it guilt? Regret? Or was it something darker? I agreed to meet her at a small coffee shop in town. It wasn't just any place, it was our place. Back when we were still married, before everything fell apart, we used to go there all the time. I hadn't set foot inside since she left, and the thought of sitting across from her in that same space felt like reopening a wound that had barely scarred over. When I walked in, the familiar aroma of fresh coffee and baked pastries filled the air. Once, that smell had been comforting. Now, it felt suffocating. Then, I saw her. Lisa was sitting at a corner table, staring down at her hands like she was trying to find the answers to her life's mistakes in the lines of her palms. She looked different. Not just older, but worn down. Like life had taken more from her than it had given. When she noticed me, she stood up awkwardly, brushing her hands against her jeans. "Alexander," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, my tone neutral. "Lisa." I wasn't going to make this easy for her. We sat down, and for a few moments, neither of us said anything. I could tell she was struggling to find the right words, but I wasn't in the mood for drawn-out pleasantries. "Why did you call me?" I asked, leaning back in my chair, arms crossed. She hesitated, her eyes darting around the room like she was afraid someone might overhear. Finally, she took a deep breath. "I've made a lot of mistakes, Alexander. I know that. But there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." A cold knot tightened in my stomach. What could you possibly have to say after all this time? She dropped her gaze, twisting a silver ring on her finger, not a wedding ring. "So, Victor never married her. That alone told me a lot." "It's about Frank and Amanda," she said, her voice cracking. The mention of our kids sent a sharp pain through my chest. My posture stiffened as I leaned forward, eyes locked on hers. "What about them?" She hesitated again, and for a moment I thought she might back out. But then she spoke. "They reached out to me." I blinked. "What?" "Frank and Amanda," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "A few weeks ago, they contacted me." It took me a second to process what she was saying. My kids, the same ones she had abandoned without a second thought, had reached out to her? "Why?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Tears welled up in her eyes. "They wanted answers, Alexander. They wanted to know why I left. Why I abandoned them." I scoffed, shaking my head. "And what did you tell them?" "The truth. That you threw them away for a guy who didn't even stick around." She winced at my words, but I didn't care. "I didn't know what to say," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. She broke off, taking a shaky breath. "I thought you moved on," she said after a moment. "I thought you didn't need me anymore." My jaw clenched. "Is that what you told yourself? That we just got over it? That we just moved on like you never existed?" Her face crumpled at my tone, but I didn't let up. "Victor and I," she started, her voice breaking, "it didn't work out. He left me years ago. I didn't feel the slightest bit of sympathy. So now what?" I asked coldly. "You think you can just waltz back into our lives and fix everything? 15 years later." She shook her head, blinking back tears. "No, Alexander. I just want to explain. To you. To them. I need to make things right." I let out a bitter laugh. "Make things right? You destroyed our family. You left me to pick up the pieces while you ran off with another man. And now, you want redemption." Tears spilled over, but I didn't care. I wasn't about to let her guilt manipulate me. "Alexander, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I can't undo what I did. But there's something else I have to tell you." I sighed, rubbing a hand over my face. "What now?" She swallowed hard, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. "It's about Amanda," she said. A sharp chill ran down my spine. "What about her?" I asked, my voice cautious. Lisa took a shaky breath, looking at me with an expression that sent a wave of unease through me. "There's something you don't know," she whispered. And just like that, I knew, whatever she was about to say would change everything. Lisa's words hung in the air, thick with tension. "There's something you don't know about Amanda." I felt a deep, cold dread settle in my stomach. My mind raced with possibilities. Was Amanda sick? Had something happened to her that I didn't know about? I clenched my fists under the table, bracing myself for whatever bombshell she was about to drop. "What about Amanda?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Lisa took a deep breath, her eyes filled with something that looked a lot like fear. "Alexander, she's not your daughter." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. The world around me seemed to tilt. The sounds of the coffee shop, the chatter, the clinking of cups, the hum of background music, faded into white noise. "What did you just say?" I asked, my voice low, dangerous. Her lips trembled as she looked down at the table, unable to meet my eyes. Amanda, she's Victor's daughter. The air was sucked from my lungs. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. My mind was a chaotic storm of emotions: anger, confusion, betrayal. Amanda wasn't mine. The little girl I had raised, the child I had loved unconditionally, fought for, sacrificed for, wasn't mine. "You're lying," I said finally, my voice like steel. "I'm not," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I wanted to tell you back then, but I was too scared. And then I left, and it was too late. I'm so sorry, Alexander. Sorry." The word felt hollow, empty, meaningless. I gritted my teeth, my hands curling into fists on the table. "You let me believe she was mine. For 15 years. You let me love her, raise her, fight for her, and now you want to say you're sorry." Heads turned toward us. I didn't care. My entire world was crumbling, and I wasn't going to sit here and pretend everything was fine. Lisa flinched at the fury in my voice. "I didn't know how to tell you," she said weakly. "I thought it would destroy you." I let out a bitter laugh. "Destroy me? Destroy me? You think keeping this from me helped?" I shook my head in disbelief. "How could you do this, Lisa?" "Oh. What about Amanda? Does she even know?" Lisa shook her head, fresh tears spilling down her face. "No. She doesn't know. I never told her." I stared at her, my blood boiling. "You lied to me. And you lied to her." She sobbed, shaking her head. "I thought it was better this way." "Better?" I spat. "Better for who, Lisa?" "For you. So you wouldn't have to face the consequences of your actions." She had nothing to say to that. I pushed back my chair, the screech of the legs cutting through the heavy silence. "I can't do this," I said, standing up. My hands were shaking, my body was trembling with rage. "I can't listen to any more of your lies." "Alexander, wait," she pleaded, reaching for my arm. "There's more. You need to hear everything." I yanked my arm away, glaring down at her. "Why should I? You've done nothing but lie to me. Why should I believe a single word that comes out of your mouth?" "Because you deserve to know the truth," she said, her voice breaking. "Even if it's too late." I hesitated. Every part of me wanted to walk away, to leave her sitting there with her regrets. But a small, broken part of me, the part she had shattered all those years ago, needed to know. I slowly sat back down, my heart pounding. "Fine," I said coldly. "Start talking. But you'd better not leave anything out." Lisa wiped her tears with trembling hands before taking a deep, unsteady breath. "It started before Amanda was born," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Victor and we were already involved when I found out I was pregnant. At first, I wasn't sure who the father was. But when Amanda was born, I knew." I clenched my jaw, my nails digging into my palms. "She looked like him," I said flatly. Lisa nodded. "Yes." I felt sick. All those years, watching Amanda grow up, seeing parts of myself in her, loving her with everything I had, and none of it was real. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice raw with emotion. Lisa shook her head, her face crumpling. "Because I was scared, Alexander. I knew if I told you, it would destroy you. And I didn't want to lose you. But then, everything fell apart, and I made the worst decision of my life. I left." I stared at her, my anger barely contained. "You didn't just leave, Lisa. You abandoned your children. You abandoned me. And now you're back, expecting, what? Forgiveness? Redemption? What the hell do you want from me?" She swallowed hard, looking more defeated than I'd ever seen her. "I don't expect anything from you, Alexander," she said softly. I needed to tell you the truth. And there's something else. Something I should have told you years ago." My patience was wearing thin. "What now?" She hesitated, then looked me dead in the eye. "It's about Frank." A fresh wave of dread crawled up my spine. I narrowed my eyes, my stomach twisting. "What about him?" Lisa opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked away, her hands shaking. I leaned forward, my voice dropping into a low, deadly whisper. "Lisa, what aren't you telling me?" She took a deep breath, then finally forced the words out. "Victor, he suspected Frank wasn't yours either." The floor might as well have been ripped out from beneath me. Everything blurred. My pulse pounded in my ears. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. "Are you telling me," I said slowly, my voice trembling, "that neither of my kids are mine?" Lisa flinched, tears spilling over again. "I don't know, Alexander. I don't know for sure. But it's possible. Possible." That word echoed in my mind like a death knell. I stood up abruptly, knocking the chair back. "I can't do this," I said, shaking my head. "I can't sit here and listen to this anymore." "Alexander, please," she begged, standing up too. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging you, let me help you find the truth." I turned to walk away, but her next words stopped me in my tracks. "I took a DNA test for Amanda." My blood ran cold. I slowly turned back to face her. "When?" I demanded. "Last month," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "After she reached out to me. I couldn't keep lying. I had to know for sure." I clenched my jaw, my entire body rigid. "And—" She hesitated, and in that moment I knew. "She's not yours," Lisa said, her voice breaking. "Amanda isn't your biological daughter." The words slammed into me like a freight train. I turned and walked out of the coffee shop, my mind spinning, my chest tight with a pain I couldn't describe. Outside, the cold air hit my face, but it did nothing to calm the storm inside me. If Amanda wasn't mine, and Frank might not be mine either, then who the hell was I anymore? The drive home felt like a blur, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind kept replaying Lisa's words over and over again. "Amanda isn't your daughter. Frank might not be either." It didn't feel real. For 15 years, I had believed I was their father. I had loved them, guided them, made sacrifices for them, held them when they were scared, cheered them on when they succeeded. And now, with just a few words, everything I had built was crumbling beneath me. When I pulled into my driveway, I didn't get out of the car right away. I just sat there, staring blankly at the dashboard, my breath coming in slow, uneven gasps. The weight of it all pressed down on me like a boulder, suffocating me. Inside, Frank and Amanda were where they always were. Frank sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone, Amanda in the kitchen pouring herself a glass of juice. They looked up when I walked in, their faces bright with familiarity, with a kind of love that had always been unshakable. "Hey, Dad," Frank said casually. "How was your meeting?" "Meeting?" That's what I told them when I left the house earlier. "Just a meeting." I forced a smile. "It was fine." My voice sounded wrong even to me. Amanda walked over, peering up at me with concern. "You look tired. Are you okay?" "No." I was not okay. But I couldn't tell them that. "Not yet." I nodded, ruffling her hair out of habit. "Yeah, just a long day." She grinned. "Then you should sit down. I'll make you some coffee." It was such a small thing, but it nearly broke me right there. She had no idea what I had just learned. No idea that the father she had always known wasn't actually her father. I wanted to tell them. I wanted to sit them both down and tell them everything. But how? How do you look your kids in the eyes and tell them that their entire existence might be built on lies? How do you tear their world apart the way mine had just been? I couldn't. Not yet. That night, after they had gone to bed, I sat in my study, a glass of whiskey in my hand, staring blankly at the wall. My entire life had been flipped upside down, and the worst part was, I still didn't have all the answers. I pulled out my phone and, before I could second-guess myself, dialed Lisa's number. She picked up on the second ring. "Alexander." My voice was firm, sharper than it had been at the coffee shop. "I want a DNA test for Frank." There was silence on the other end before she finally whispered, "Okay. I'll help you arrange it." I didn't thank her. I didn't say anything else. I just hung up. A week later, the results arrived in my inbox. I stared at the unopened email for what felt like hours, my heart pounding, my hands clammy. My finger hovered over the mouse, and for the first time in my life, I hesitated. Once I opened it, there would be no going back. Finally, I clicked. I scanned the document, my stomach tightening, my breath catching in my throat. And then I saw it. Probability of paternity, 0%. Frank wasn't mine either. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen, the words blurring in front of me. 15 years. 15 years of fatherhood, of loving them, of putting them first. And not once had I doubted that they were mine. Not once had I thought that Lisa had done this. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. I grabbed my phone and called Lisa again. She answered immediately. "Alexander." "You knew," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "No," she said quickly. "Alexander, I swear I didn't." "Don't lie to me, Lisa." "I had my suspicions," she admitted, her voice breaking. "But I convinced myself they weren't true. I wanted to believe they were yours. I wanted to believe I hadn't ruined everything." I let out a bitter laugh. "Well, congratulations. You did ruin everything." "Alexander, please," she pleaded. "They don't need to know. It doesn't change anything. You've been their father all these years. That's what matters." I clenched my jaw. They deserve to know. They deserve to know who they really are. "Please," she begged. "Let me help. Let me talk to them with you. We can figure this out together." "Together," I repeated, my voice dripping with disdain. "There is no together, Lisa. You made sure of that 15 years ago." I hung up before she could say anything else. That evening, I called Frank and Amanda into the living room. They sat across from me, their faces filled with confusion and concern. "What's going on, Dad?" Frank asked. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. "There's something I need to tell you," I said, my voice breaking. "Something I just found out. And it's not easy to say." Amanda frowned. "What is it?" I hesitated. This was it. I looked them both in the eye. "I recently found out that, biologically, I'm not your father." Amanda's face went pale. Frank just stared at me, his expression unreadable. "What?" Frank's voice was barely above a whisper. I swallowed hard. "Your mom, she made mistakes. She made choices that hurt all of us. But none of this is your fault. And it doesn't change how much I love you." Amanda's eyes filled with tears. How could this happen?" Frank stood up abruptly, running a hand through his hair. "This doesn't make sense. You're my dad. You've always been my dad." "I know," I said, my voice thick. "And I always will be. If you'll let me." Amanda wiped at her tears, her voice trembling. "Does Mom know?" "She does," I admitted. "And she wants to talk to you. But only if you're ready." Frank turned away, his hands clenched into fists. "I don't know if I can handle this right now." I nodded. "I understand. Take all the time you need. But I want you both to know this. Nothing has changed for me. Nothing. I love you both. I always will." Amanda sniffled, clutching a childhood photo of the three of us. "Are you still going to be our dad?" she whispered. I looked at her, my heart breaking. "I was never not your dad," I said. "That will never change." Amanda threw her arms around me, sobbing into my chest. Frank stood stiffly for a moment, then finally sat back down, his face tense. I reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. He didn't pull away. The pain wasn't going to disappear overnight. The wounds were still fresh, the betrayal still raw. But for now, we were still a family. And no DNA test could ever take that away. The next morning, I finally answered Lisa's call. "We need to talk," she said immediately. "I think we've said enough," I replied, my voice cold. "No," she insisted. "There's more you don't know." I exhaled sharply. "Fine. Meet me at the park in an hour." When I arrived, she was already there, sitting on a bench, her hands fidgeting in her lap. She looked up as I approached, her face tired, almost desperate. I didn't sit down. "What now, Lisa?" I asked, crossing my arms. She swallowed hard. "I didn't just leave because of Victor. I narrowed my eyes. Then why? She hesitated, then looked up at me with pleading eyes. Because I was scared, she whispered. And because Victor blackmailed me. My blood ran cold. What? She let out a shaky breath. He knew about Amanda. He knew about Frank, too. He threatened to tell you before I could. He said he'd ruin me if I didn't leave with him. I stared at her, my stomach twisting. You let him destroy my life, I said, my voice dangerously low. And now you expect sympathy? No, she said quickly. But I need you to understand, I was manipulated too. And I regret it every single day. I ran a hand down my face, my frustration boiling over. You regret it? I scoffed. That doesn't fix anything, Lisa. She nodded. I know. But I want to make things right. If you'll let me. I didn't answer. Because for the first time, I wasn't sure if I wanted her anywhere near my family ever again. I stood there, staring at Lisa, waiting for the words that would somehow make this all make sense. But nothing could. She had left. She had lied. And now, after 15 years, she wanted to explain it all away with regret? With a sob story about how Victor had forced her hand? I shook my head, the anger bubbling just beneath my skin. You don't get to make things right, Lisa. You don't get to walk back into our lives and pretend you care now. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her jacket. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I don't deserve them. But I do love them, Alexander. I never stopped. I scoffed. You had a funny way of showing it. She swallowed hard. Will you let me talk to them? I hesitated. It wasn't my choice to make. That's up to them, I finally said. I'm not going to force them to see you. You left. And now you have to live with what that means. She nodded, biting her lip. I understand. And for the first time I saw it, the weight of her guilt, the years of regret she had carried. I didn't pity her. But I did believe she meant what she said. Not that it changed anything. I turned to leave, but she called after me one last time. Alexander. I glanced back, my patience worn thin. No matter what the DNA says, she whispered, you're their father. That will never change. I didn't respond. Because I already knew that. That evening, Frank and Amanda sat with me in the living room. The tension from the past few days still lingered, but something had shifted. We talked, Frank said, his voice careful. Amanda and I. My stomach tightened. And Amanda reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. We don't care what the DNA says, Dad. You are our father. You always have been. I let out a shaky breath, my chest tightening. Frank nodded, his expression firm. You raised us. You loved us. That's what matters. I looked at them, these two incredible kids I had fought so hard for, and I knew in that moment, nothing Lisa had said could ever take them from me. I had lost so much. But I hadn't lost them. And for the first time in years, I felt something I thought had been stolen from me a long time ago. Peace. The past would always be there, a scar on the life I had built. But scars meant survival. And I had survived. We had survived. And no matter what came next, we would always be a family. Thank you for visited my YouTube channel. Your support, likes, and comments truly inspire me to create even more engaging content. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. You're a part of this amazing community, and I'm thrilled to share my stories with you. See you in the next video on YouTube.